the house, the police found the body of a young woman. Inside, they found traces of blood and semen. In the kitchen, there were signs of a struggle. The husband, a man with Down syndrome, sat nearby, not trying to escape. His hands were shaking, but he did not say a word. The story of this family began quite normally, if you don't count the husband's special condition, which set the tone for their relationship from the very beginning. He was 32 years old. His name was Danny. He was diagnosed with Down syndrome at birth, but his parents managed to provide him with a relatively normal life. He graduated from a special school, could read and write, worked in a furniture assembly workshop, was quiet, trusting, loved order, and a familiar routine. She, Sarah, looked different. 26 years old, beautiful, slim, with bright hair, and a smile that attracted the attention of those around her. They met by chance. Sarah worked as a waitress in a small cafe where Danny often went for lunch. He was polite, always paid tips, and gave compliments. At first, for her, it was just friendly communication, but gradually she noticed that he was sincerely in love. Danny's parents approved of the relationship. They felt that their son had finally met a woman who would accept him for who he was. The wedding was quick, a small celebration, a few relatives, no fanfare. From that moment on, they began living together in the house that Danny inherited from his father. At first, everything was quiet. Sarah kept house, Danny worked, and they watched TV in the evenings. But gradually, oddities began to appear. Sarah often laughed at the way he expressed himself or how slowly he did something. At first, it looked like jokes, but then it turned into constant ridicule. She could call him a big baby in front of guests. She could sharply raise her voice over a trifle. She could demonstratively roll her eyes when he tried to explain something important. The first intimate relations between them arose on her initiative. It was unexpected for Danny. He was used to Sarah pushing him away when he tried to hug her. But sometimes, after quarrels or her rude words, she suddenly became affectionate, could put on a beautiful dress, offer to go to a restaurant, and in the evening, invite him to the bedroom herself. For him, it was a kind of reconciliation. He didn't realize that she was controlling him in this way. Every time she was cold or insulted, there would be a period of attention and closeness, and Danny took it as a sign that everything was okay, that she loved him. Neighbors noticed that Sarah was often unhappy. She could loudly quarrel with her husband, and the next day, go with him to dinner at an expensive restaurant. These changes seemed strange to those around her, but no one interfered. The family looked outwardly prosperous, and Danny was known in the area as a quiet and harmless person. Over time, Sarah began to feel burdened by her husband's excessive attachment to home and work. She wanted a vibrant life, night bars, company, new acquaintances. Danny did not understand this. He suggested going to the cinema or buying new furniture, considering this an expression of care. Sarah wanted something completely different, attention from people who seemed to her more interesting than her husband. And yet, she continued to maintain relations with him, sometimes unexpectedly showing passion. For Danny, it became something of a reward. After long humiliations, an unexpected night of intimacy, he did not know that Sarah could meet other men during these same days, which he did not even suspect yet. This duality, humiliation followed by affection, gradually formed confusion and dependence in him. He did not know how to be truly angry, did not know how to express resentment in words. All he could do was remain silent and wait for her to become kind again. But this delicate balance began to crumble when Sarah began leaving home more often in the evenings, citing friends or work. Danny believed, but somewhere deep inside, there was a vague uneasiness. After a year of living together, Danny's usual routine was completely disrupted. Sarah came home late more and more often, explaining it was because of work or meetings with friends. He, trusting by nature, did not ask unnecessary questions at first, but the changes were too obvious. New makeup, expensive perfume, dresses that she had never had before. Her behavior became more and more abrupt. Humiliations alternated with unexpected outbursts of tenderness, and this confused Danny. Sexual relations between them now arose suddenly, as if she were using them to confuse him. After a day full of harsh words and coldness, Sarah would suddenly come up to him, hug him, quietly whisper something tender. She would suggest going to a restaurant where she would order expensive dishes, wine, laugh with the waiters, and then returning home, as if according to a script, she would become passionate and demanding. Danny mistook it all for love. He didn't understand that these periods of intimacy were just a tool for her. When she wanted him to shut up, to stop him asking questions about her late nights, or new girlfriends. She chose the path of seduction, and he believed again and again. But along with this, new people appeared in her life. Neighbors said that they saw Sarah in the city center with a strange man. She laughed, held his arm, and then came home in the evening and told her husband that she was with colleagues. Danny began to notice the scent of someone else's perfume, traces of lipstick that wasn't her shade on the glasses in the kitchen. After her girls' nights, his vague suspicions grew, but every time he tried to ask, Sarah responded with a sneer. "Are you jealous?" she said, smiling as if he had said something stupid. "Don't make me laugh." И уже через несколько часов она могла устроить ему вечер нежности, как будто стирая резкость своих слов. Для Дэнни это было похоже на качели. Унижение, потом ласка, потом снова холод. Он не понимал, как к этому относиться, и каждый раз надеялся, что теперь все будет хорошо. Сексуальная напряженность между ними становилась все выше. Сара делала это демонстративно, появлялась дома в откровенной одежде, могла при гостях позволить себе намеки, из-за которых Дэнни краснел, а потом уезжала на работу и возвращалась под утро, пахнущая чужими духами, но с готовностью вести себя так, будто ничего не произошло. Однажды Дэнни случайно услышал ее телефонный разговор. Сара смеялась, говорила кому-то о встрече, называла адрес, просила забрать ее на машине. Когда он вышел из комнаты, она мгновенно прервала звонок и холодно сказала: «Не подслушивай, это не твое дело». После этого случая у Дэнни появился привычный для него страх. Он не умел спорить, не умел ругаться, но что-то внутри него изменилось. Он начал ждать ее возвращений, выходил на крыльцо, прислушивался к звуку машин на улице. Сара все больше теряла осторожность. Она могла вернуться с чужим мужским шарфом в сумке, могла принести домой цветы и сказать, что это от коллег, хотя работала в небольшом кафе, где никто никогда не дарил цветы официанткам. В их сексуальной жизни тоже происходили перемены. Если раньше она могла быть ласковой, то теперь часто вела себя холодно, а близость происходила только тогда, когда ей нужно было, чтобы Дэнни замолчал или перестал задавать вопросы. Это было похоже на сделку, которую он не осознавал. Соседи стали замечать, что Дэнни выглядит растерянным. Он стал молчаливее, меньше разговаривал с людьми. Его коллеги в мастерской говорили, что он часто сидел, глядя в одну точку, и едва реагировал на вопросы. Тем временем Сара вела себя все более вызывающе. Она могла рассказать мужу о несуществующих подругах, которых он никогда не видел. Она могла специально упомянуть, что кто-то предложил ей подвезти ее домой, наблюдая за реакцией Дэнни. Но он не устраивал скандалов. Он только сильнее замыкался в себе. Лишь однажды, когда она вернулась под утро, он спросил: «Ты где была?» «Тебя это не касается», — ответила Сара, даже не посмотрев на него. И в этот же вечер она, как будто ничего не произошло, снова устроила ему ужин при свечах, снова стала нежной и внимательной. Для Дэнни это было мучительно. Он не понимал, что происходит, но чувствовал, что что-то рушится. Подозрения нарастали, но доказательств у него не было. Он не умел искать их. Он просто молча наблюдал, как жена все дальше уходит от него, оставляя лишь редкие эпизоды близости, которые он принимал за любовь. И именно тогда у него впервые появилась мысль проследить за ней. After months of growing anxiety and his wife's strange behavior, Danny began to notice little things that had previously seemed insignificant. Sarah would come home with a strong scent of someone else's perfume that he had never smelled before. Receipts from bars and restaurants he had never been to together would appear on the table. New dresses and jewelry would appear in the closet, the origin of which his wife would explain reluctantly and with irritation. His doubts grew stronger with each passing day. Danny had always been a trusting, almost conflict-free person, but now he began to experience a feeling he had never known before, a mixture of resentment and confusion. He could not shout, he could not argue, he could not blame. He simply observed. However, these observations gradually formed a clear picture. Sarah left the house more and more often, stayed longer, and became colder. Sometimes she disappeared for a whole night, returning in the morning with an indifferent face and a tired look. One evening, when she again said she was going to see a friend, Danny decided for the first time to follow her. He waited for her to leave, then threw on his jacket and went outside. He walked carefully, trying to keep his distance, Sarah quickly walked to the bus stop where a car was waiting for her. An unfamiliar man was driving. Danny watched as she got in next to him, and they drove off toward the city center. He stood motionless and watched the disappearing headlights for a long time. That evening, he did not go home right away. He wandered the streets for a long time, not understanding what to do with what he had seen. After that incident, he became more attentive to details. He started checking her phone when she left it unattended. He didn't always understand long messages, but even short phrases were enough to sense a lie. Recordings with names he had never heard of, conversations that were clearly hidden from him. Sarah continued to behave defiantly. Now she almost did not try to hide anything. She came home late, talked about non-existent friends, left her phone face down. Danny watched all this silently, but something was building up inside him. He began to keep a notebook in which he wrote down the dates of her departures, the time of her return, notes on strange calls, and new things that appeared in the house. Over time, his habit of waiting for her by the window became noticeable to the neighbors. People saw him standing motionless for long periods of time, looking at the road. Sometimes he would go out onto the porch and sit there for hours, even in cold weather. Each day, he slept less and less. At night, he would wake up and check to see if she had returned. If she had not returned, he would sit in the dark and wait until morning. The suspicion turned to certainty when he followed her again one day and saw her meeting the same man. They hugged by the car, then drove away together. Danny stood still, his hands in his pockets, watching them disappear around the corner. Something changed inside him in that moment. He began to imagine what he would say to her when she returned. But when she showed up at home again that evening and acted as if nothing had happened, he remained silent. He could not explain even to himself why he had not said a word. From that day on, he lived as if in two realities. In one, he was still a quiet husband who went to work and waited for his wife for dinner. In the other, he was a man who knew about her infidelities, collected evidence, and could not find the words to stop what was happening. Sarah continued to play the same role. Sometimes she was harsh, sometimes she was gentle, as if she alternated between cold and warmth on purpose to confuse him. For Danny, it became torture. He no longer understood whether he loved her or was simply clinging to the remnants of his usual life. Anger he had never felt before was building up slowly but surely. Every new evening of her absence made it stronger. Every smell of someone else's perfume, every new thing, every late call added up to a heavy, dull resentment. He no longer hoped that everything would explain itself. His notebook was filled with pages of dates, addresses, times. He knew he was collecting this for a reason. A sense of the end was growing inside him, but he didn't understand what it would be. By late autumn, the tension in the house had become unbearable. Sarah no longer hid her trips. She would get ready in front of Danny, put on new dresses, put on makeup, check her phone every few minutes. She would leave without explanation, returning in the early hours of the morning. Her behavior became an open challenge, as if she wanted him to know the truth but did not dare say anything. Danny was silent all this time. He continued to keep a notebook, noting every trip, every strange call. His colleagues at work noticed that he had become absent-minded and irritable. He often forgot his tools, could sit for an hour without moving. With a tired face, he hardly slept at night, ate poorly, smoked a lot. Neighbors increasingly saw him at the window, where he stood motionless until late at night, watching the empty street. At some point, he stopped hiding and started following her openly. When Sarah got into her lover's car, Danny stood nearby and watched, not trying to hide. She saw him, but did not react, as if she no longer cared that he found out. This silent contempt was the last straw. One night, when Sarah returned home after a long absence, he met her in the kitchen. The lamp was burning on the table. The food was still untouched. Sarah entered with an irritated face, took off her coat, and threw her bag on a chair. There were no words between them. She looked at him tiredly and walked to the refrigerator, as if it were an empty space. Danny stood by the door and didn't move. There was no strength left inside him, no questions. Everything that had been building up for months, resentment, humiliation, jealousy, merged into one feeling, heavy and dull, like a lump in the throat. He didn't want any explanations anymore. The moment was quick, almost lightning fast. There was no argument. There was no shouting. Sarah didn't even have time to understand what was happening. When the noise died down, the house was silent. Danny sat on the floor, not looking at the body. His hands were shaking, but he made no move to run or hide. It seemed he himself did not fully understand what had happened. The neighbors saw a light that didn't go out all night. In the morning, one of the neighbors knocked on their door, but it was locked. She called the police. When the officers entered, they found Danny in the kitchen. He was sitting on a chair, staring into space. Sarah's body lay nearby. There were few signs of a struggle. The whole scene seemed like a sudden but deliberate act. No fuss, no chaos, an eerie silence. Danny didn't resist. He didn't say a word when they took him away. The police arrived at the scene early in the morning. Neighbors gathered at the gate, whispering among themselves, but no one dared to come closer. The house stood with the door open. Investigators were working inside. They were photographing the kitchen, collecting objects, and recording everything in a report. The scene looked eerie, not because of the blood, but because of the strange silence that seemed to freeze in the air. Danny sat in a chair in the corner of the room. He didn't resist, didn't ask any questions. His hands were folded in his lap. His face was motionless. He didn't seem to fully understand what was happening. One of the officers noted in his report that the suspect hadn't said a word since he was taken into custody. Sarah's body was taken away for examination. Doctors recorded multiple injuries characteristic of a sudden attack. Investigators began questioning neighbors, Danny's colleagues, and Sarah's acquaintances. The picture quickly emerged. Almost everyone knew about her infidelities, her nightly disappearances, and the strange behavior of her husband, who stood at the window for months and watched the empty street. Danny's interrogation took place that same day. He was brought to the station and seated at a table. There were 2 investigators and a stenographer in the room. He sat up straight, barely blinking, and answered briefly. When asked about what had happened, he uttered only one sentence: that everything was true, that he had seen her with another man, that he could not stand it any longer. Investigators recorded no resistance to arrest, no attempt to escape or destroy evidence. A psychiatrist's report later concluded that he had decreased impulse control due to emotional stress and mental retardation. The investigation did not last long. The evidence was clear. Witnesses confirmed Sarah's infidelities and Danny's strange behavior in recent months. At the trial, the prosecutor presented expert examination materials, photographs from the scene, notes from Danny's notebook, where he noted the dates and times of her absence. These notes became important evidence of premeditation, although the defense insisted that the murder was spontaneous, without a pre-planned plan. The court hearings were calm. Danny sat with his head down, showing no emotion. Sarah's relatives did not hide their indignation, believing that the punishment should be as severe as possible. Danny's parents asked that his condition and medical history be taken into account. Experts confirmed that the defendant had Down syndrome and mild mental retardation, but noted that he was aware of the nature of his actions. This ruled out the possibility of declaring him insane. The verdict was handed down 3 months after the tragedy. The court took into account the mental state, but did not recognize it as a decisive factor. Danny received a long sentence in a colony for persons with special conditions of detention. After the verdict was announced, he showed no emotion. He only looked up once when the judge read out the sentence, then lowered his head again and did not look at the courtroom again. The neighbors discussed the incident for a long time. It was a shock to everyone. A quiet and calm man, known in the area for his kindness and harmlessness, committed murder in his own home. The city could not get used to this idea for a long time.